What's going on, guys? You got Crave here, and let's look at dealing damage as Unholy Death Knights with a focus on the Soul Reaper talent. Now, I only recently got back into the game around Easter, and well, I had to take a break, which was really just out of my hands. And when I got back, I just decided to get on my Alliance DK. Now, I know patch 7.2.5 should be out pretty soon. If anything changes, anything significant changes, then I'll make sure, well, at least I'll try to do a follow-up video. Also, this is just for normal or casual content, and as with any class guides I've done, it's pretty basic, and the goal is to, well, to share how I play with the class and without being, being a burden to most groups. So if you want to top the meters, other guides might be better, although I do fairly pretty well, I think. So anyway, just click on the specific part you want to check out on those little stuff you're seeing on your screen right now. If you don't make a selection, I'll start with the stat priority section. Now, for your stat priority, this is the ideal list for me and will really depend on the gear you get. I'm not very lucky with orange gear. In fact, I only have the shoulders, and to me, the Unholy playstyle can really shift based on the drops you get, and even some minor shift in stats. So for this list, strength is pretty much available in all your pieces, but in areas where you can't get them, I feel that mastery should be the stat to aim for due to shadow damage being a major portion of your overall damage dealt. Now, haste is pretty much important as it affects your rune regen. Now, it really sucks to be in situations where you are starved for that resource. Now, crit is, well, it's a great stat just to have that chance at big damage, but it will also give you more reasons for a talent pick, which I will show you later. Okay, so talents time, and as an easy recommendation, I suggest going with Ebon Fever. It's a 20% damage increase to a dot you have to maintain anyway. Now, being a recent resub and because of RNG, I don't have the orange piece, which makes bursting swords a good option. Although swords is pretty fun to watch even without them, the flying damage numbers are nicer to look at. Now, for tier 2, so that you don't trouble yourself too much, Pestilent is a good choice to ensure that you get one rune after bursting a number of wounds. Blighted is a great option if you want to manage your wound generation better. In fact, I often run with Blighted Rune Weapon because it's really just that easy to get your opener going. Now, for the third row, and as with a number of DKs I've come across, I like Clawing Shadows as a pick. This is also a ranged attack, which is great. If for some reason your target gets repositioned, keep in mind that it replaces Scourge Strike, which means that if you have high amounts of mastery, this makes this pick a really good one. There's also the Scourge of Worlds proc that you have to consider, but we'll go into that later in this video. Now, still on tier 3, and given the stat RNG from drops and where you can get your gear, your mastery may not be as high, or you may have other stats that are better. I suggest Castigator as a talent pick, especially if your crit is, well, your crit chance is quite high enough. You'll have an easier time applying wounds and bursting them. This is of course based on the amount of crit you have. For tier 4, it's really up to you, but I guess this will also be based on what your raid leader asks of you. So if you're not sure what to pick, maybe as a default you can go with Sludge Belcher, mainly because you're given the hook ability, which acts like a death grip. Row 5 has two options in my mind, so I often run with Lingering Apparitions, mainly because DK movement options are, well, non-existent, and if you expect a lot of magic damage, then Spell Eater it is for you. For row 6, I like all the talents here from a playstyle perspective, but to trim it down, I suggest Necrosis or Infected Claws. Now, Infected Claws is an easier pick to suggest, as on the onset, it doesn't require anything on your part. It will require that you watch and make sure not to waste wounds on your target. AoE situations are also good, especially if all targets are inside your Death and Decay zone. It might also be better to switch your row 1 talent for AoE scenarios. That is, if you're part of a raid that expects maximum output in all situations. Now, Necrosis requires that you hit your Scourge or Clawing Shadows ability for 40% more damage after hitting your target with Death Coil. While it requires watching procs and alternating abilities, this is great for single target scenarios. The last tier is another tier where I like all the talents. I've been toying with Soul Reaper for a while now, and it's been great. If you can make sure that you have high enough wounds on your target and you can fit it in to get in 3 stacks of the haste buff, then of course you go for it. Dark Arbiter is another great talent provided you have a lot of runic power to work with, and it will really depend on your gear. Take note that the Arbiter doesn't gain the damage buff based on how much rune you have, but how much you have to spend. I honestly misread that initially. Now, the last pick is Defile. It's another good talent which is especially good in AoE scenarios. The increase in mastery and area affected are good things to have. All in all, I like the talents in the last row, but if you have to pick one, I would suggest Soul Reaper, as it seems like a very good default option. It has a pretty steady benefit, well, provided you manage to fit in all the wounds and strikes required. Okay, it's time to talk about your artifact weapon. Now, I've done other guides before and played other classes, and most artifact weapon abilities aren't that interesting, to be honest. Only the Fire Mage, Assassination Rogue, and yeah, I think just those two classes really just caught my interest until I learned of Unholies. Now, being able to summon more undead based on the number of wounds you have on a target is pretty awesome. Now, before I continue, don't forget that you can buy the highest artifact knowledge boost from your main if your DK is an alt. This ensures that leveling artifact weapons will be much easier to reach, basically to reach the 5 final artifact traits, and from there you can work on the grind that I dislike so much in this expansion. Now, this part of this guide won't be of much help to you if you already have your artifact knowledge at the rate of the hundreds of thousands of millions, as consuming artifact power tokens will just simply net you so much. If, however, you are starting out, I recommend this path. Take note that this is how I decided to level my weapon, and with artifact knowledge getting easier to come by, you can easily go a different way. For the third path, some of the traits aren't that exciting, so I decided to go this way to reach Double Doom. After that, just make sure to finish up on the remaining traits to unlock the new traits, the 5 new ones. So once you unlock those new ones, and I'm still working on mine, I suggest focusing on these 4 traits. After this, it personally becomes a bit difficult to choose which traits to go for. They're all pretty much essential to maximize your damage output. Harbinger, Deadliest Coil, Rotten Touch, and so on. So basically, they really all just look like very good traits. With that, I'll leave it to you how you want to progress your artifact. Okay, so this is the ability section of the guide, and I won't talk about the whole spellbook, and I won't touch on the talents unless necessary. So you have right here your damage CDs, they're Army of the Dead, Summon Garg, Raise Dead, Apocalypse, and Transformation. Now the longer CDs are Army of the Dead and Summon Gargoyle. Now all of these except for Transformation are Summon type CDs. Take note that Transformation, Summon Gargoyle, and Raise Dead do not have any cost needed to cast them. If you want more summons, you can pick Arbiter in your last tier of talents. Now for your other abilities, just keep in mind that your rune and runic power based skills all have a disease feel to them. Now Outbreak is the DOT effect you must keep up on all targets at all times, and remember that it does play a large portion of your total damage output. Now Death Coil is a runic power dump ability which sometimes procs a free cast and works with the Necrosis talent to make one of your attacks stronger. Take note that Death Coil also works with Sudden Doom and Scourge of Worlds. Now Sudden Doom causes your Death Coil to be a free cast, while Scourge of Worlds makes your Clawing Shadows ability hit much harder. Now, Festering Strike is your main wound generator, while Scourge Strike bursts them to deal the damage. On Death and Decay or Defile, just keep in mind that the range cleave for Clawing Shadows applies if you are standing in the effect. So if your target moves, staying in the D&D or Defile zone means you still have the cleave effect. For your other remaining abilities, well, Anti-Magic Shell has its obvious use, but what I like to stress here is the ability also generates runic power based on magic damage taken. So it can also be used indirectly as an offensive ability unless you plan on saving Shell for some big magic damage. Now Death Grip has the fun pull use, but keep in mind it can also be used as a quick interrupt for non-immune pull targets. Now Mind Freeze is pretty much easy to understand, while Wraith Walk just helps you to get out of the bad. Okay, let's talk about gameplay, and let's just keep things simple, and I won't mention specific times for uses. Now, before the pull, you can cast Army of the Dead and complete the cast, and also at this point, just before the pull, make sure to use any buffs before engaging, like pots, flasks, or trinkets. Just make sure you don't waste them by hanging around. Now, all this can be done if you're running with an organized raid group. Now, the rotation or priority system in a single target scenario, it can vary depending on your talent picks. It might also be affected by the gear you have, especially if you have the legendary or orange gear that's required for Unholy DKs. As with the title of this video, we'll focus on Soul Reaper. Now, if you don't have the legendary gear or the orange gear for Unholy DKs, then just simply follow the sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But if you do have legendary gear, that may change your rotation. So in this case, I do have the legendary shoulders. So what happens here is that, as I mentioned there, we're going to have to move Dark Transformation towards the bottom of the list right after Apocalypse. So that's mainly because we do want to take advantage of it and buff our existing Army of the Dead, Apocalypse, Summons, and Gargoyle. And like below line 3, if you have Blighted Rune Weapon, then make sure to use it at that step, and you sort of change up or rework what you do based on the amount of wounds you generate. Also, I know it's listed down there in the notes part, but priority system should be followed throughout the fight. Now, I also want to mention that you have to build your wounds before using Clawing Shadows or Scourge Strike, especially if you have that legendary gear that allows you to burst more than 1 wound per strike. Also, make sure to build up resources for abilities that are coming up like Soul Reaper and Apocalypse. Now, Infected Claws talent can also increase wound generation, so watch out. Sometimes you might get surprised. You might just cap the number of wounds you have on your target. Now, for AoE scenarios, and the easy thing about Unholy DKs is that your single target attack rotation or priority system works well in AoE scenarios. The only difference is adding Death and Decay into the mix, especially when a lot of adds are involved. While this guide revolves around Soul Reaper, taking Defile is a pretty good thing to do. If you want to eventually get into progression rating, it goes without saying that you carry around tomes to clear your talents. Switch over to Defile when you have the chance for AoE scenarios, and get back to Soul Reaper when you're about to face a boss. Now, before I close this video, I will suggest using the add-on Tell Me When in case you have a hard time tracking everything going on with Unholy Death Knights. A bit of a shameless plug for the video, or the simple video I did a while back. Now, this video is really just, as I mentioned, a simple guide to help you get started with the add-on. If you're interested, just click on that little white strip of video suggestion you're seeing up top. And that's it for this Unholy Death Knight guide. Really interesting class to play with, as I've only toyed around with Blood and Frost in the previous expansion. It brings a pretty exciting spec to a class whose 2 other options are pretty straightforward in Legion. So if you have any comments or suggestions for this video, just leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.